The question of having a personal faith, and whether it's positive or negative in my life, is quite a deep question for me. I'll give you a potted history, but I've talked about it in more detail elsewhere, and I'll have a link in the link below. When I was a kid, my parents, they didn't go to church, and faith and Christianity wasn't part of our daily family life. Excuse me, but they did pack us all off to Sunday school, which was de rigueur in those days, to get a moral education. And I think it was really important. I've got to be honest, I do believe in this notion of informed consent, which I've talked about elsewhere. When a patient comes to me and we're going to ask them to make a decision, have an operation, put a valve in, do a bypass, have a bronchi, anything, give this drug, that drug, the decision is ultimately theirs. But it has to be an informed decision. I can't say to them, you could have this new drug or you could have that old one. You have to give them dispassionate, informed information, and then they're not making a decision in a vacuum. See how important that is? Well, I think the same about religion. I believe all kids should be taught about all religions, which after all are a fundamental part of life. And I don't mean just Christianity in my culture in Australia, but Islam and Hinduism and Buddhism and atheism as well. Taught dispassionately. This is the basis of them, and this is how they've influenced our culture, particularly our laws and our values, where they all come from. And we've got a lot of immigrants, like 25% of the population come from somewhere else, and we need to understand what drives them and what drum they're marching to. Anyway, so I do believe in having kids go to Sunday school, or certainly for religious education in schools. I'm never quite sure why people react to it. I think it should be core business, so we can understand life and our culture. Anyway, that was me. But when I went through medical school, something happened to me, and I've talked before about my questions. I'm just a questioning person. How do we all get here? Well, medical school gave me an extra layer of that, because we began to learn about the human body. And my goodness, it is a wonderful universe. It's a spectacular universe of molecules and cells. And right from the beginning, you get a set of chromosomes from mum and a set from dad, but only one set from each. And they make your nose. The same chromosome, the same blueprint makes your nose. It knows where to put the nose, it knows where to put the eyes and the ears and 5 fingers on the end of your hands. The endocrine system, you make too much, it feeds back, and then that tells you to make less. And if you're not making enough, it tells it to make more, and on it went in medical school. And I thought, this is astonishing. I had a sense of awe. Oh, that didn't make me believe or disbelieve anything. It just added to my sense of awe and wonder. But ultimately, it was friends who I talked to, who showed me stuff and got me to read stuff. But I got to the point where I thought, it strikes me that you have to be in or out of this. You can't just hover. I was a hoverer. Really, I think. Sometimes more, sometimes less. So I sort of stood outside the house and thought, am I going to give this 100% go? Sign up for it, if you like. And I just thought about all my friends who would laugh at me. That's honestly what I thought about. It affected my oldest son. It was a question he asked me about that too. Anyway, I made the leap of faith and became a Christian. And for the next 4 or 5 years, I not only became a Christian, but I became a gung-ho, sort of over-the-top Christian. I became a leader and do some lay preaching, and I was involved in a beach group that would go and play guitars at the beach and go out and talk to people in the cars and tell them to become followers of Jesus. And I loved it. They were wonderful people. But I tell you what happened to me, and it's not just peculiar to me, but it is the way I'm wired. I started to feel inauthentic, because in leadership, of course, you can't say what you think. You have to say what you should say. And I got what I call should poisoning. You have to act and say as you should as a leader, particularly of young people. Started to feel hollow after a while, and when the time it got to me was we had a Bible study group, and I liked it, but they said, well, it's your turn to lead next week. I didn't know anything, and they said, well, just read this chapter. This is what we believe. So I read the chapter and I thought, that's what you believe. Oh, I didn't choose that. I just happened to be going to that church. Felt so inauthentic. And then issues like suffering, I mean, these weren't questions that were answered. And I'm, as I've said, a very questioning person. I had a lot of hard questions and I really wasn't getting answered, and I felt inauthentic. I mean, and I thought, who am I with all of this? Not everybody goes through this. In fact, maybe most people don't, but it really rocked my boat. So I gradually, over a period of some months, withdrew, pulled out of the church, and I went up to Papua New Guinea and rode a motorbike around, nearly killed myself, just normal kind of stuff, partying a bit. Then I came home. Then I went on a backpacking trip. Grew a beard, long hair, beard, jeans, and a backpack and a guitar, and a bit cliched, the guitar. But anyway, headed off around Asia, just around Asia. In those days, the hippie trail was London to Kathmandu or the other way. People went on buses. I worked out that's not a good idea. Didn't want to go on a bus because I'd be surrounded by other people who were Westerners. And also I wanted to fly from country to country and then go around the buses on those countries and meet people in the villages and walk and talk and visit clinics and all that stuff. And I did. I had a book with me in my backpack, God is Dead. I was reading the God is Dead literature, and I read about Buddhism and Hinduism and all that sort of stuff. And the story of how that impacted on my faith journey I've told elsewhere. I won't repeat it here. But the key moment occurred in Thailand, meeting Twink and Brian Parry and getting their advice to my honest, agonising questions. Then I went to England, and about 18 months, 2 years later, maybe 18 months later, I caught the ferry across with my backpack again and then hitchhiked around Europe, sleeping in various places in a little tent I had. And then I still had all those questions. This is the end of my 3-year journey. I didn't know it was the end, but Twink Parry had drawn me a map of how to get to a Christian commune called L'Abri, quite famous, Francis Schaeffer. And I hitchhiked there and used her map to get a bus up to the commune, lived there for a few months, and what was great about it, it was honest answers to honest questions. That's their theme. Not cliched answers, not dogma. My goodness, it really worked for me. I was the perfect sort of person for a place like L'Abri. So basically I jumped on the train again. But from then on, my faith was authentic. I knew myself. I once described it when people asked me what it's like to try to find who you are. I said I felt like I was in a sugar cube in a cup of coffee, but it's dissolved and you kind of can't see what it is. Didn't sort of quite know who I was. And this was like one of those experiments where you pull the cube out of the supersaturated solution and it crystallizes, and you can look at it and see it, and then from then on it can be redissolved because you've seen it. And I felt like I'd learned who I was, and then I could no longer be defined by my family or my football team or my career even. I was an individual, and I think people would say I'm a pretty authentic kind of person. I speak and act authentically. I don't live for how people see me, and I don't do things because I want people to see me a certain way. I just am who I am. And that's sort of the case in faith too. So I have a very strong Christian faith, but it hasn't been a simple journey. But at least it's authentic.